We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? I'll give the call to the member for McPherson.
My question is to the Prime Minister. According to the ABS, there are now 34,000 more unemployed Australians than a month ago. Inflation soaring above the RBA's target band, leading to concerns about stagflation. And every month, the average household is paying $1,800 more on their mortgage under this Labor government. Is this what the Prime Minister meant when he promised no one will be left behind?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question, but it was an interesting use of statistics there, because I was waiting for him to mention the fact that 1.1 million jobs have been created under this government. I was waiting for him, and I forgive him, because he wasn't here, of course. If he was here in May of 2022, he would have known that inflation had a 6 in front of it. Was double what it is now. He would have known also that interest rates started to increase under the former government, and that there have been, in fact, 3 reductions in interest rates this year under this government. He would have known when it comes to fiscal policy that they sat there, promised a budget surplus in their first year when they were elected in 2013 and every year thereafter, and in fact they delivered just 0 when it comes to surpluses, but this Treasurer delivered not 1 but 2 budget surpluses, the first consecutive budget surpluses in 20 years. He would also know, when it comes to cost of living, that this government has progressed a range of changes, from cheaper medicines, the rolling out of urgent care clinics, the tripling of the bulk billing incentive to lower health costs. He would know that the difference that we've made in paid parental leave, in the superannuation guarantee, have made a difference. He would know that the minimum wage has increased each and every year under this government, something that is the direct result of the deliberations of the Fair Work Commission, but with the advantage of having submissions from a government that supports real wage increases, not opposes them, because the former government had low wage growth as a key feature of their economic architecture. He would know that as well. So the member's forgiven in his first term. I congratulate him on his election for being here.
The member for Goldstein is warned. Do not interject with that kind of interjection.
From a bloke who spoke about the Wilson government online, talk about fantasies. I think you're safe there, Leader of the Opposition. I don't know about the others behind you, but I reckon you're pretty safe from this bloke.
Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Ford.
My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government helping to deliver cheaper, reliable energy for Australians? Are there any risks to our energy security?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Ford for his question, and I re-congratulate him on his election as well. Mr Speaker, when we came to government, we inherited a debacle of a situation when it comes to energy, and it was put very well by Mr Curry of the Australian Financial Review. Always worth reading, Mr Speaker. And he said this: in reality, the climate wars of the past 2 decades, caused primarily by recalcitrance from the Conservatives, is the reason why the energy grid today is such a dysfunctional and costly mess as it tries to play catch-up. Mr Speaker, I couldn't have put it better myself. But when we came to government, of course, what Mr Curry is referring to is the fact that 24 out of 28 ageing coal-fired power stations announced they were closing within the decade. 8 had already closed, including Hazelwood, because they were old and at the end of their lives. That all happened on the Coalition's watch. And then they put $3 million into a feasibility study for Collinsville, remember that? With zero chance of it ever progressing. And, of course, it didn't progress under them. They did nothing about it, no plan whatsoever for our long-term energy security. And since the election, of course, they've ripped themselves apart over energy policy. They haven't been fighting about this for 6 months. They've been fighting about it for 2 decades, Mr Speaker. 20 years with 23 different failed energy policies, 3 Prime Ministers torn down over the issue.
Order.
Well, we on this side of the House have one energy policy and we are delivering it. And it's providing certainty.
Order.
And this is how it's going.
Order.
The head of the Australian Industry Group responsible for manufacturing was asked, does Australia need another debate about net zero? And this is what Innes Willox had to say. Oh, God, no, no, anything but, please. We've been there before many times over the past 20 years. For many in business, there will be a lot of eye-rolling about this, simply because business had hoped that the broad fundamentals were settled. And that is what is so important. The Business Council of Australia, brand black.
Order. The member for Lyne, the member for Forrest and the member for O'Connor, all 3 of you are now warned. Just enough of the interjections. You've just been going non-stop. Have some control. Listen to what the Prime Minister is saying. Show respect, and the Parliament will be a lot better for it. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. They're actually sledging the Business Council of Australia. That is where the modern Liberal Party have got. That's where the modern Liberal Party have got. He said, we're very much committed to net zero. We have been for some time. Indeed they have. The business community want investment certainty. That is what we're delivering.
Has concluded. Give the call to the honourable member for Cook.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister promised Australians, and I quote, real, permanent, meaningful help with the cost of living. However, in my home state of New South Wales, more than 4 in 10 people are concerned about going without food. More than a third have skipped meals to cover the essentials. More than 1 in 3 will need financial assistance in the lead up to Christmas. In only 3 short years, this promise is neither real, permanent nor meaningful. When will the government address the cost of living pressures facing Australian families?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Cook for his question, and indeed I think the member for Cook has made some outstanding contributions from time to time, and I'll quote him.
Order.
When working at McKinsey, he was the co-author of an article titled Carbon Light, How Australia Can Power Ahead in a Net Zero World. You haven't even heard the quote yet.
Order. The Prime Minister will just pause. Order. Members on my right. Members on my right. And the member for Nichols will cease interjecting. Members on... The member for Isaacs. I want to hear from the manager on a point of order.
Just on the point of relevance, we don't need any more time to know the Prime Minister wants to answer what he wants to answer, but this is not the topic of the question at all. And you can tell already he's off topic.
Order. The member for... I'll hear from the Leader of the House first before I deal with anyone else.
Mr Speaker, just to the point of order. The question's really broad. It goes to anything that's related to the cost of living, and the Prime Minister's being relevant.
Order. It wasn't a I think everyone can agree it wasn't a specific question about a figure, a number, a yes or no. I think we can all agree on that. There was quite a lot in that. And I think if someone asks a question and the Prime Minister is referring to that member directly, he's done that and he's entitled to do that. So we're just going to make sure he's being directly relevant to the topics he was asked about cost of living, about a number of other points, particularly on the economy that he was asked about, including in the lead-up to Christmas, and about Australia. And the question was about when will Australians get the support they need. That's a pretty broad question. I think everyone can agree with the nature of the question, so we're going to make sure the Prime Minister is being directly relevant, and he'll continue.
Mr. Speaker, they'll get the support they need from this government, because that's what we do each and every day. And indeed, the member for Cook, who went on to back in the policy that was established by the former member for Cook when they established the net zero target under the former Morrison government, had this to say: McKinsey analysis estimates that these opportunities would add about Australian dollars $75 billion to the Australian economy each year through to 2035, as well as an additional 130,000 direct jobs over the period. I reckon that would help them out, 130,000 direct jobs. He went on to say, Australia is facing a global economic transition that it cannot stop. Fortunately, the lucky country can make its own luck. Blessed with natural endowments, it can ensure a just transition with abundant economic and employment opportunities in the same regions that will be affected by the inevitable decline in fossil fuel exports. Well, there it is, Mr. Speaker. There it is, Mr. Speaker. There it is.
The member for Cook has asked
and
I'm
asked also about living standards, about prices going down. Let me just give a few facts. On the 1st of January, the price of medicine goes down to $25. The lowest it has been since 2004. I reckon that'll help people. Pensioners and concession card holders, the price of medicine's frozen at $7.70 for the rest of the decade. I reckon that helps people. For 108,000 families and small businesses who've installed a cheaper battery, the price of installing solar is down and their energy bills are down permanently. I reckon that helps people. Tell you something else that helps people: the tax cuts for all 14 million Australians that we implemented that were opposed by those opposite, where the member for Cook went to an election saying that not only had he voted against it, they'd introduced legislation into this chamber to increase income taxes for every single Australian taxpayer. The fact is that we are focused on cost of living. Those opposite are just focused on each other.
With the call to the member for Reid.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Albanese Labor government helping Australians take advantage of reliable renewable energy? What policies would deliver less reliable forms of electricity? Why is certainty so important?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and the Minister for Energy.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question and thank her for everything she does representing her community so well, Mr Speaker. And I'm pleased to inform the House that 110,022 Australian households have now taken up the Albanese government's cheaper home battery policy, up around 2,000 since yesterday. Australians getting on with the job of reducing their emissions and their bills. But of course, we know that there's much more to do. And that's why today the Albanese government has announced our latest reforms to energy pricing in Australia, particularly the introduction of Solar Sharer, which will see a compulsion on energy companies to deliver an option for their consumers in default market offer states of having a free power period in the middle of the day. And we can do this because 4.2 million Australian houses have rooftop solar, which means there's plenty of cheap and often negative price power in the system during the day, and that has not been passed on to consumers as much as we would like. So we will require energy companies to offer this. Now, think about the opportunities for someone working from home, for example. People working from home will always have the support of this side of the House, and those people will be able to shift their energy use in some instances to the middle of the day and know it is for free, with no charge coming. Or a retired couple, a pensioner couple living at home, who can know between maybe 12 and 3 that their energy will be free. Or someone with an app that can control their power and can schedule their dishwasher or their washing machine to be free of charge operating in the middle of the day. These are important, meaningful reforms that put Australians more in charge and deliver cost-of-living relief. And that's what real reform looks like, important reforms to ensure that consumers are put first. And the member asked me what threats there would be and what would be an unreliable source of energy. And of course we know that the most unreliable source of energy in the Australian grid at the moment is coal-fired power, with coal-fired power stations being broken down all the time. Now, we've had some revelations from those opposite in recent days, not only net zero, but the National Party announcing they support building new coal-fired power stations. The leader of the Nats said one of the ways you can reduce emissions is to build new coal-fired power stations. And the leader of the opposition, the leader of the Nats, says that was Page. Well, he did refer to the Page report, which was the National Party report he called crucial. And to justify this, the Page report refers to, and I quote, independent modelling by Arch Energy, which found that an ultra-supercritical coal plant could supply electricity. Now, when I looked at this independent modelling, what does it say? By Arch Energy, this report is written solely for the benefit of Coal Australia. That's what the independent modelling is, solely for the benefit of Coal Australia, and they assume a coal price of $40 to $60 when actually the coal price is over $100. I might assume I'll look like George Clooney next year. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, Mr Speaker. You can't just assume your way to cheaper energy prices. You need to deliver policies for it.
Before I call the member for Indi, I'll just welcome a few people to the parliament today. First of all, Mr Darren Young, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition from the Northern Territory, Jacinta Amakora, the State Member for Western Victoria, as a guest of the Deputy Prime Minister, and also in the gallery today are alumni and participants of the Pathway to Politics for Women program, hosted by the member for Reid. On behalf of all members, good luck in your careers and welcome to you all. I give the call to the honourable member for Indi.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Environment. Regional Australia is key to the success of the energy transition, and we know 70% of regional Australians are in broad support. However, poor community consultation is eroding social licence. The EPBC bills do not include a community consultation standard that would build trust. Will the Minister commit to best practice community engagement standards under the new EPBC Act?
The call to the Leader of the House as the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment.
Thanks very much, Speaker. And I thank the member for Indi both for raising the legislation, but also following what has been a theme for the member for Indi in her entire time in this place about community consultation and involving the community in decision-making. The environment legislation that's before the chamber is aimed quite squarely at being able to deliver better outcomes for the environment and also a faster decision-making process. As part of that, as people know, it's based closely on the Samuel report. The Samuel report noted that the Act, as it's currently portrayed, doesn't have clear standards, doesn't have clear benchmarks. And one of the areas that Graham Samuel referred to where these benchmarks and standards could be established is with respect to community consultation, raised directly there. Now, we've said that soon we'll be making draft standards available for matters of national environmental significance and for offsets, also the First Nations engagement standard and data and compliance would come next. None of these standards actually have force until they have legislation to bounce off effectively, to launch from. And so the Samuel Review recommended other standards, including a community consultation standard. My understanding is the Minister, also I know the Minister's looking into it, and my understanding is the Minister's spoken directly to the member for Indi about community consultation standards as well. But as I say, to be clear, we can't actually make any standards until the bill has become law. And this is where we have had a long time with the Samuel report not becoming law. For a long time, since this bill was commissioned in 2019 and handed to the then Environment Minister, now the Opposition Leader in 2020, we have had 5 years where the recommendations that have been there for a better outcome, where the recommendations have been made for what the outcomes will be that would deliver a better outcome for the environment and a better outcome for business, and we have not had the situation where the legislation's been before the parliament to be able and to make its way through the parliament. Right now, it's before us, and we have an opportunity now to put the legislation through, which would do, among different things, provide the opportunity for the exact sorts of standards that the member for Indi is putting in place. And I just hope, as all members on this side hope, that the parliament takes the opportunity to finally follow through on recommendations that have been waiting too long, and during that time the environment has suffered, business has suffered. It's time to get this done.
The call to the honourable member for Jagga.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Why is reliable energy so important to Australia's economy, and how does that compare to other approaches?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Speaker. I thank the member for Jagga for the question, but also for the really important work that she does with the Minister for Climate Change and Energy in our team. Now, the member for Jagga understands, even if those opposite do not, that the transition to cleaner, cheaper, more reliable energy is a golden economic opportunity for our country and for its people. And that's because as the ageing coal-fired power stations become less reliable, as they come out of the system, it's those two influences which are pushing up prices, and that's why an orderly transition and considered investment in cleaner, cheaper, more reliable energy is so important to our economy. Now, Mr Speaker, when we released our 2035 targets, we put out the detailed Treasury modelling at the same time, and the conclusions of that Treasury modelling were really clear. And the conclusions were that clear and credible climate action will lead to more jobs, higher wages and better living standards. An orderly transition will give businesses the clarity and certainty they need to seize the opportunity and invest in Australia with confidence. And it also concluded that a disorderly transition would mean fewer jobs, less investment, lower wages, lower living standards and higher power prices in a smaller economy. Now, what the Treasury also concluded, Mr Speaker, when they released these three scenarios, is that the only thing worse than a disorderly transition would be to abandon net zero entirely, which is what those opposite are proposing to do.
Treasurer will pause. The member for Page has the MPI today. I do not want another word out of him today, otherwise we will not have a matter of public importance. I mean it. If you want a matter of public importance, it's simple. Don't interject anymore, because I'm left with another choice. So everyone's crystal clear about what's going to happen. Great. The Treasurer has the call.
Mr Speaker, what those opposite are contemplating represents economic insanity, pure and simple. Now, if you look at the document that the Treasury put out with the modelling, they made the following points clear, and I'm quoting the Treasury. The economic cost to Australia of not pursuing net zero would be significant and consequential. Not pursuing net zero by 2050 risks lower economic growth, reduced investment, missed export and employment opportunities and higher electricity prices. These outcomes would flow from several channels, including heightened policy uncertainty, increased borrowing costs on global markets and the loss of potential new export markets. These are important points, Mr Speaker. Theirs is a recipe for higher energy prices, lower wages, less investment, less reliable energy and fewer jobs in our economy. But we know, as the Prime Minister said, they're not really focused on the jobs of the Australian people. They're only focused on their own jobs. They are absolutely tearing themselves apart over net zero. They are divided, they are divisive, they are delusional, and that's why they're in disarray. But, Mr Speaker, when it comes to this most important economic transformation, this side of the House will continue to work through the issues in a considered and methodical way, because our objective is to make the most of this crucial economic transition in our economy so that our people benefit.
Call to the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and my question goes to the Treasurer. The Treasurer has overseen a litany of economic disasters, but always blames someone else. Higher energy prices, someone else's fault. The fastest fall in living standards in the developed world, someone else's fault. 12 interest rate rises, someone else's fault. Unemployment's up, someone else's fault. On our way to $1 trillion of debt, someone else's fault. Will the Treasurer take some responsibility for his economic mismanagement?
Give a call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. When there are good developments in the economy, I share the credit with the Australian people. And I, as Treasurer, and this government, we take responsibility for working through the challenges in our economy. And having taken responsibility for cleaning up the mess that was left to us by those opposite, it's time for those opposite to acknowledge as well and to take responsibility for the fact that they had inflation running twice as high as it is now. And they had huge deficits as far as the eye can see, and they racked up $1 trillion in Liberal debt. They doubled the debt even before the pandemic, Mr Speaker. So we take responsibility for working through the difficult issues in our economy. We're getting real wages moving again. We got inflation down to half of what we inherited. We delivered a couple of surpluses. We got the deficit in the third year down to a fifth of what we inherited from those opposite. We got the debt down by $188 billion, saving Australians $60 billion in debt interest compared to what those opposite left them, Mr Speaker. And so if you look right across the board, whether it's unemployment, average unemployment under this Prime Minister, the lowest of any government in the last half a century. If you look at the progress we've made together on inflation, if you look at the fact that unemployment is 4.5%, historically low, Mr Speaker, and part of an average unemployment rate much lower than what was left to us by those opposite. Now, we're under no illusions about the challenges in our economy, Mr Speaker. We take those challenges seriously, and inflation is one of them. But more than acknowledge that people are still under pressure despite the progress we've made together, we're actually doing something about it. Now, when Australians are under pressure, this building, this House of Representatives, has two choices: to do something about it in the most responsible way that we can, which has been the approach of this Albanese Labor government, or to oppose that cost of living help and to take the most irresponsible course of action, which is what the course that those opposite have adopted. So I finish by saying this, Mr Speaker. If those opposite really cared about the cost of living, they wouldn't have opposed our tax cuts. If those opposite really cared about electricity prices, they wouldn't have opposed our efforts to give people a bit of help with their electricity prices, Mr Speaker. If they really cared about the cost of living pressures in communities right around this country, they wouldn't have opposed our efforts to make medicines cheaper. I could go on, Mr Speaker, but I hope they get the point. There's a difference between hoping for cost of living pressures, which is their approach, and doing something about them, which is our approach.
Call to the member for Bean.
Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. Can the Treasurer update the House on the Reserve Bank's decision on the interest rates today?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. As honourable members would be aware, today the Independent Reserve Bank kept interest rates on hold at 3.6%. I do acknowledge that many Australians would have wanted to see more rate relief at this meeting, but this decision was widely anticipated by markets and widely expected by economists. Now, it is the case that inflation is much lower than we inherited from those opposite, and that has given the Reserve Bank the confidence to cut interest rates 3 times already this year. And those 3 interest rate cuts do reflect the very substantial progress we've made in our economy together. When we came to office, headline inflation was 6.1% and rising. It's now around half of that. When we came to office, trim mean inflation was almost 5% and rising. It's now been within the target band for 3 consecutive quarters, albeit at the top of the target band now. If you look at around the world, inflation ticked up in September for every major advanced economy except the UK, where it was flat, but much higher than it is here. Now, Mr Speaker, once again, as I did in the answer a moment ago, I acknowledge and we acknowledge that even with this progress we've made, Australians are still under pressure. Those 3 interest rate cuts are providing a bit of relief, but we know that many Australians would have preferred to see more relief delivered today. We've got inflation down, we've kept unemployment low, the economy's continued to grow, the private sector is recovering in welcome ways, we've got real wages growing, and interest rates have fallen 3 times this year, but we always know that there is more work to do. Now, Mr Speaker, if you have a look at the forecasts which were also released with the Reserve Bank's decision today, you will see that when it comes to government spending in the Reserve Bank's own forecast, they've actually downgraded the contribution made by public spending in our economy. And I think that does torpedo some of this dishonesty that comes from those opposite about the role of government spending, and so I point that out, Mr Speaker, acknowledging the usual politics will be played by those opposite. But if those opposite want to claim that budgets are the decisive factor in interest rate decisions, then they've got to explain those 3 interest rate cuts this year, including 2 interest rate cuts which came after the budget in March. Mr Speaker, we will continue to work through the issues in our economy, the challenges in our economy, in the most responsible and considered and methodical way. We've made a lot of progress together in our economy. We know there's more work to do, and we've acknowledged that throughout.
Call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, Australians have just been denied a Christmas rate cut because of Labor's reckless spending. 32% of households are going without food or skipping meals, and in some suburbs 90% are struggling to pay their mortgage. Labor has just killed a Christmas rate cut. Is this what the Prime Minister meant when he promised that life would be cheaper under him?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, notwithstanding some of the rhetorical flourishes in that question, the fact of the matter is that this side of the House is the only side of the House, sometimes with support from the crossbenchers, to be fair, some of the time. We have implemented a consistent policy of support of cost of living measures, consistently. And when it comes to fiscal policy, of course, we are happy to compare our fiscal policy of 2 budget surpluses and lower deficits of savings, $188 billion of reduction in debt as a result of government actions, $60 billion less in interest payments on that debt as a result of government actions, with the previous regime of 9 years, which promised a budget surplus in the first year and every year thereafter and didn't deliver a single one. One of the things that characterises this government is that we go and we under-promise and over-deliver. We didn't go to an election. We didn't promise that we would produce
Leader of the Opposition will cease injecting
surpluses, and yet we delivered not 1 but 2. We dealt with issues such as the member interjects about power prices. We didn't go to an election saying there would be a $600 billion nuclear plan. What we have done is to intervene in the market to put a cap on coal and gas prices. That's something that we did that was pretty unprecedented. We didn't promise we'd do that, but the global inflation spike and the biggest energy crisis since the 1970s required urgent government action, and we did that in partnership with the Perrottet government in New South Wales, a Liberal government in New South Wales that actually behaved responsibly, at that time, unlike those opposite, who've opposed all of that, like they opposed the energy bill relief, they opposed the tax cuts, they opposed the pay rises for low-income workers, they opposed fee-free TAFE and said that people don't value it if they don't pay for it, they opposed cheaper medicines, they opposed all of those measures, and the Leader of the Opposition interjects, suggesting, just like the speech she gave recently, which foreshadowed austerity measures going through, how will that help people?
Concluded. Give the call to the honourable member for Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Industry and Innovation. How is the Albanese Labor government's delivery of reliable energy driving good blue-collar jobs in regional Australia? What are threats to this?
Give a call to the Minister for Defence Industry, the Minister for Pacific Island Affairs and the Minister representing the Minister for Industry and Innovation.
Thank you, and I thank the newly shaven member for Hunter and his passion for jobs in our community is very laudable. Speaker, we know that our vibrant, world-class industrial sector delivers good jobs for Australians, hundreds of thousands of jobs, and most of them in regional Australia. But the truth is, Speaker, without access to cheap and reliable energy, these industries and jobs are under threat. Just ask the workers at Tomago. And Rio has been very clear. They haven't been able to secure competitive coal power offers. That's the truth of the matter, Speaker. But it's a very different situation in Gladstone, where Rio have been able to secure renewable energy agreements. Boyne Island Smelter has secured 80% of its electricity needs through new firmed renewable projects, the cheapest power available, Speaker, and at prices that not only keep the smelter open, but give the owners the confidence they need to invest. The bottom line is that without access to reliable energy now and for years to come, heavy industries like smelters will not have a future. And the future, Speaker, is renewables. And the Albanese government recognises this. And we're supporting industry as it moves to renewable energy through the Powering the Regions Fund and the Green Aluminium Production Credit. The Net Zero Fund will invest $5 billion from the NRF on energy efficiency and decarbonising at large industrial sites, and also invest in low-emissions manufacturing. And the Capacity Investment Scheme, Speaker, is delivering 40 gigawatts of the cheapest generation and storage available. And the CFC, which those opposite tried to abolish, has driven renewable energy infrastructure and technology projects nationwide. But the truth is, Speaker, at Tomago, we're seeing the consequences of the Coalition's decade of energy policy failure. 22 failed energy policies, and the workers of Tomago are paying the price.
Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, I'm also asked about threats. We've been modernising our electricity grid, and the Coalition has opposed us at every step of the way. The Coalition has campaigned against generation projects across the nation. And in abandoning net zero, the National Party has betrayed regional Australia, even though they know regional Australia has the most to gain from taking action on climate. Renewables are creating jobs and new revenue sources right across regional Australia. And in campaigning against affordable energy, the Coalition is campaigning against blue-collar jobs. We're making sure that we can deliver the cheapest power possible and, in turn, a world-class, vibrant industrial sector. In contrast, the Coalition's chaos and division is making energy more expensive, unreliable, and will kill manufacturing stone dead.
Order. Before I call the member for Page. Look, the Leader of the Opposition, no one else is interjecting for a majority of the answer. To be continually interjecting like that, it's not acceptable. So I'm just going to ask you to assist the remainder of question time to limit the interjections so we can continue. The call to the member for Page.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Tomago Aluminium supports around 1,000 workers in the Hunter region of New South Wales and is looking at a potential closure. Tomago COO Jerome Dizol has said, quote, "Unfortunately, all market proposals received show future energy prices are not commercially viable." Minister, you say renewable energy is cheaper and that you are installing lots of renewables for the future. If that is the case, why can't Tomago get an energy price in the future that is affordable?
Good question. Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question, and I thank him for quoting the Rio Chief Executive Officer. I think it would have been better, however, if he'd not stopped mid-sentence in that quote, because the member for Page read out part of the quote. He said, "Unfortunately, all market proposals received so far show future energy prices are not commercially viable." But there's not a full stop in the quote, there's a comma. And he goes on to say, "and there is significant uncertainty about when the renewable projects will be available at the scale we need." Now, the point is, Rio and Tomago are arguing for more renewables, not less. They are not blaming renewables. They're calling for us to do more, and we agree with them, Mr Speaker. the opposition are the ones out of touch. The opposition are the ones who are so desperate they actually have to cut a sentence halfway to make their case. Now Rio runs more than one smelter. They also run a smelter in Gladstone, and that smelter is safe. And one of the reasons that smelter is safe is because they have been able to enter into contracts with renewable energy providers. That's why. And of interest, perhaps to the House, some of the renewable energy contracts that the Gladstone smelter has entered into are with Smoky Creek Solar Farm and another solar farm in the area. Another solar, Calliope Solar Farm, and as well as being the two solar farms, Smoky Creek and Calliope, that Rio has entered into arrangements with. You know what else they've got in common? The member for Flynn opposed them both. Member for Flynn opposed them both. Publicly campaigned against both of them. So this is the hypocrisy of those opposite. They rail against renewable energy and campaign against it, when people who actually understand how the economy works, like Rio, actually support renewable energy and enter into contracts with the very projects that those members opposite campaign against. I mean, they are so out of touch with the economic reality of Australia in 2025. They have to misquote Australia's biggest employers. They were just a few moments ago laughing at the chief executives of the Australian Industry Group and Business Council of Australia and saying, what would they know about the economy? The Australian Industry Group and the Business Council. Those geniuses who sit behind the leader of the opposition know better than the Business Council and the Australian Industry Group about business and industry. I think that tells us a lot.
Yeah. Call to the honourable member for Leichhardt.
Yeah. Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Resources in Northern Australia. How is the Albanese Labor government ensuring a strong resources sector that creates good and well-paid jobs in Australia's regions? What proposals are threatening Australia's resources sector?
Call to the Minister for Resources and the Minister for Northern Australia.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Leichhardt for his question. He knows, like the Albanese Labor government knows, that a strong resources sector is vital for regional communities and for Australia's economic future. That's why we're backing projects that not only deliver jobs today but set us up for the industries of tomorrow. Mr Speaker, the road to net zero runs through Australia's resources sector. Through our critical minerals resources, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity for new Australian resources projects to underpin the global transition. That's right, the global transition to net zero. The Albanese Labor government supports net zero emissions by 2050, which of course stands in stark contrast to the utter circus that is the Coalition's failed climate policy. And that's on top of 22 failed energy policies, 4 of which they came up with in 14 days not that long ago. Mr Speaker, the chaos and division of those opposite would make energy more expensive, more unreliable, and would absolutely kill investment in this country. Mr Speaker, it is those opposite that is the threat to our resources sector in this country, have no doubt about it. Meanwhile, this government, the Albanese Labor government, is getting on with the job of delivering a strong resources sector that is backing in new jobs and new investment in our regions. We are backing the critical minerals and rare earth sector through our $17 billion production tax incentive. Now, that is the biggest government investment in an Australian resources sector in this nation's history. And those opposite voted against it, Mr Speaker. Let everyone remember that. But us on this side, we know that every dollar invested in critical minerals and resources helps scale up projects, helps bring more jobs to our regions, more apprenticeships, more opportunities for small business right around our regional communities. Mr Speaker, this government is backing important strategic rare earth projects. Take, for example, in Alice Springs, the Great Arafura Nolans Rare Earth projects. This government has invested significantly in that project, but we don't invest alone. Alongside us, accredited agencies from the governments of Canada, of the Republic of Korea, of Germany and, of course, the United States of America. And why are they backing it? Because it is an important geostrategic project of global significance. But for the people of Alice Springs, what does it mean? It will support 600 construction jobs with 350 new ongoing roles in Alice Springs. Now, that is of vital importance for a town like Alice. Now, while those opposite squabble and squawk about their various energy policies, their various climate policies, this government continues to represent. We will deliver for the regions while those pretend to represent the regions. We are serious about backing the resources sector of this country while those only pretend to.
Call to the member for Curtin.
This question is to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment. The benefits in the current environmental protection reforms are at risk of being undermined by huge loopholes. Under the reforms, projects can pay for environmental damage into a centralised offsets fund. But in New South Wales, Queensland, the Pilbara and overseas, these funds have consistently failed to deliver real environmental outcomes. Will the government consider amendments to put stronger safeguards around this offsets fund so it actually delivers for nature?
Give the call to the Leader of the House and the Minister representing the Minister for Environment and Water.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I thank the member for Curtin for raising the legislation in that particular aspect of it, and acknowledge the member for Curtin in a time and this place has followed these issues relating to the environment throughout a whole time here. If I can go through the changes that are there with respect to offsets in two sections, if I may. The first is a change. At the moment, under environmental law, there's a principle of no net loss. Under the new principle, it goes to net gain. And that's a significant shift that happens in terms of what offsets are aiming to be able to deliver for the environment. The second concept at the moment is that a business delivers an offset directly themselves, and that's the only option. And as the member for Curtin has described, under the legislation, there becomes an option of either delivering the direct offset, the business itself, or paying for the government to do it via a restoration contribution payment. There is potentially a real strength for the environment in the payment mechanism if we get this right, and it's this. When you have small offsets all over the place, effectively you end up with no sections that are large enough or have landscape scale to have true environmental resilience, particularly when we're dealing with climate change. If you can have somebody who is independently charged with looking at where those offsets occur, then instead of businesses choosing this area and that area, and effectively you end up with a map of Australia that looks like someone's got a toothbrush and spattered bits of paint, you get these tiny little dots with no resilience, you end up with a situation where you can deliver landscape-scale offsets which are capable of resilience and therefore delivering a long-term outcome for the environment in a scenario where we've made the change I referred to at the start of going from no net loss to a net gain. So that's why the independent restoration contributions holder is established. The concept of that holder is effectively for the land sector an equivalent to what we have under the Water Act for the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder, where you have someone who is in charge of holding these, in this case this amount of money, but delivering with a direct obligation to provide landscape-scale outcomes, which project by project the environment has never been able to get out of the EPBC Act. The concept that the member refers to in terms of the government's appetite for amendments, the minister has made clear that we are in discussions on this legislation. We want to be able to see it get through, and we're in constructive conversations with the different groups around the parliament. We want to make sure that we get this done and we get it done this year.
Give the call to the honourable member for Gilmore.
My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government's record investment in bulk billing making it easier for Australians to see a GP for free after a decade of cuts and neglect? What has been the response to these changes?
Call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thanks, Speaker. The member for Gilmore is an amazing advocate for a stronger Medicare on the South Coast. Because of her relentless advocacy, we'll soon be extending the operating hours at the Batemans Bay Urgent Care Clinic to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, to soak up some of the demand that's going to flow from changes to the hospital at Batemans Bay that the New South Wales Government has made. We'll also shortly announce details of the urgent care clinic at Nowra that is going to soak up some of the demand from the really busy emergency department at the Shoalhaven Memorial District Hospital. But it's not just better urgent care that the member for Gilmore campaigns about. She's been out and about talking up our record investment in bulk billing, Mr Speaker. She recently visited Grand Pacific Health in Nowra, where the practice manager, Charisse Morris, said this, Mr Speaker: "This will make a huge difference. If people don't have to pay that gap for general consults, that's food in their mouth." The Sussex doctors at Sussex Inlet posted this on Facebook. She brought this to my attention. "Healthcare made more affordable at Sussex Doctors. We're proud to be a fully bulk billing clinic, ensuring everyone in our community can access quality medical care." Prime Minister will love this. "Your appointment covered by Medicare, just bring your card," they said. The Bomaderry Creek Health Centre also said on Facebook that they're bulk billing all patients from the 1st of November 2025, and recently the member met with GPs at the Queen Street Medical Centre at Maria, Mr Speaker, and they're also taking up this expanded bulk billing incentive. In just 1 week, Mr Speaker, the number of GP clinics in Gilmore that bulk bill every patient that comes through their door has doubled. In just 1 week, Mr Speaker. Today, almost half of the practices in Gilmore are 100% bulk billing, and that number will continue to grow, Mr Speaker, because these clinics in regional Australia get an even bigger boost from our record investment than clinics in the city, Mr Speaker. The Medicare payment for a standard bulk billed consult, Mr Speaker, in a town like Maria last week was $44. This week is $87, double the price it was last week, Mr Speaker. It's doubled in 1 week. And those bulk billing clinics for 100% of their patients get 12.5% loading on top of that, Mr Speaker. That is why these clinics are making the shift. It's obviously good for their patients, so that the patients can go to the doctors when they need it rather than when they think they can afford it, but it's also good for the practice, and it's also good for the individual doctors. And that's why the member for Gilmore is out there talking up our record investment.
Call to the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question goes to the Prime Minister, and it follows the Treasurer's earlier remarks about today's RBA statement. What the Treasurer didn't reveal about that statement is the RBA's forecast for headline inflation to peak at 3.7% in the middle of next year, well above the target band, and not to return to the band until 2027. My question to the Prime Minister is, given the government's spending is running 4 times faster than the economy, isn't it time to rein the Treasurer in to stop his spending spree?
To the Treasurer. Order. The House comes to order. The Deputy Leader has asked his question. Nothing started yet, so we'll just reset. You've asked your question. Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I don't think the Shadow Treasurer has thought through his question, because if he had, or if he understood the forecasts released half an hour or so ago, or if he was being honest with the House and therefore the Australian people, if he was talking about the forecasts, he would point out that the Reserve Bank has revised down the contribution made by public spending to the economy. Now, either he doesn't understand that, which is troubling, or he does understand that and he's trying to be dishonest about it. Equally troubling, Mr Speaker. Now, when it comes to the Reserve Bank's forecasts of inflation, the point that they have made in their statement on monetary policy today is that a number of the factors which drove up the inflation number in the most recent data they consider to be transitory. They do acknowledge, as we do, that there's still inflationary pressures in the economy, but they say when you compare quarter on quarter, they expect there to be a moderation in December. Now, that's not necessarily my opinion. Those are the words that the Reserve Bank put out in their statement of monetary policy about half an hour ago, Mr Speaker, and so he should be honest about it. And similarly, Mr Speaker, when it comes to this idea, which is wrong, that government spending is the reason why we have seen an unwelcome tick-up in inflation in the most recent data. And similarly, if he wants to say that government spending and government's budgets are the decisive factor in interest rate decisions, then he needs to explain those 3 interest rate cuts this year, Mr Speaker, including 2 after the March budget, Mr Speaker. Now, if he wants to talk about what the Reserve Bank Governor thinks about the government's fiscal position, then perhaps he could read into the Hansard, as I'm about to do, what Governor Bullock said last week when she was asked about the fiscal position. And this is what Governor Bullock had to say, I'm quoting, "We have got relatively low debt compared to other countries, relatively low debt to GDP ratios. Our deficits as well, we've had a couple of surpluses, and the most recent deficit, in fact, is quite small as well." And this view that the Reserve Bank Governor has is shared by Fitch Ratings Agency last week when they reaffirmed our AAA credit rating. So, Mr Speaker, I'm very happy to take as many questions as he can muster when it comes to the forecasts and when it comes to the fact that even with the revised forecasts, the Reserve Bank is expecting under this government for inflation to be considerably lower than the higher and rising inflation left to us by those opposite.
Call to the member for Petrie.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting first home buyers into their own homes sooner, and what other approaches to housing is the government being asked to consider?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Petrie for her question. Speaker, since our government was elected in 2022, almost 1,000 of her constituents have bought their first home with the support and backing of our government, and there will be many more to come, Speaker. Now, Mr Speaker, Australia is in the grips of a housing crisis that's been building for 40 years. We know that the long-term fix here is we've got to build more homes. The majority of our historic $43 billion housing agenda is devoted to doing just that. The more housing we build, the more affordable housing becomes for Australians. Now, Speaker, we got some good news. Just yesterday we learned that building approvals around Australia are up 15.3% on last year, Speaker. These are meaningful numbers, and this number has been growing fairly consistently now for 20 months. We have got a long way to go on housing, but we're seeing some really important progress. Now, our government knows, Speaker, that people need help on housing right now, and that is why we are so proud to see a massive expansion in home ownership opportunities. Our government has now helped 197,000 Australians around the country get into their first home with our 5% deposit scheme. Now, Speaker, the member asked me about alternative approaches, and we do see from those opposite a completely different attitude to housing. They are completely out of touch, not just with energy policy, but also with the housing experience of Australians, Speaker. Now, in fairness to those opposite, this is not a new feature of the 48th Parliament. You'll remember, Speaker, when Malcolm Turnbull was Prime Minister, he said the answer for young people trying to get into their own home was that parents should shell out to help their kids, which doesn't help much if your parents aren't millionaires. When Joe Hockey was asked what advice he'd give to a young person struggling to get into housing, get this, Speaker, he said, "Get a good job that pays good money." As if the housing challenges facing our country is some kind of personal failing of the young people around the nation. Now, Speaker, we know that for most of the time the Coalition were in office, they were so disinterested they didn't even bother having a housing minister. And yesterday, the member for Wright said the quiet part out loud. According to him, the Coalition didn't have a housing minister because there was no problem with housing under the former government, Speaker. Mr Speaker, let me be really clear. The reason they didn't have a housing minister wasn't because there was no crisis, it was because they didn't care, Speaker. Under those opposite, house prices in Sydney more than doubled. Rents skyrocketed and an entire generation in our country gave up on the idea of home ownership. They spent 9 years doing absolutely nothing about this problem. They then went into opposition and they've spent the last 3 years trying to block and delay things that will help. They're now doing everything in their power to show all of you in the public gallery that they are not even remotely concerned with your problems but just with their own. Speaker, I wouldn't trust them on housing or anything else that matters to you and your family.
The call to the member for Calare.
To the Infrastructure Minister. In 2007, the National Party turned the first sod on the Bells Line of Road Expressway. This kicked off a golden age of broken promises, delays and funding raids on a fast road over the Blue Mountains that all major parties are guilty of. And the traffic jams from the Central West to Sydney are worse than ever. Will your government commit to turning the Great Western Highway into a genuine expressway to Sydney?
Give the call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thank you very much, and can I thank the member for Calare for the question. I know this is an issue that he feels very strongly about. I understand through my office's engagement with the New South Wales Minister, Minister Aitchinson's office, that they are currently undertaking a white paper investigating options for upgrades to the Great Western Highway, and that is currently well progressed. I also understand that you have met with Minister Aitchinson to discuss the progress of this work in New South Wales. As a member would appreciate, with projects of this nature and the size, that we can't really proceed without the support of the New South Wales Government. Their consideration of this project is still underway, and of course then, as we do in the usual way through budget processes, we consider any proposals to see whether the Commonwealth will co-invest with those. But as you are aware, the proposed tunnel between Katoomba and Lithgow was committed to by the former LNP government, with only $2 billion committed for works either side of the tunnel and an extra $500 million committed by the New South Wales Government. The middle section alone of that tunnel would cost in the order of $11 billion and would be the longest road tunnel in the country under the Blue Mountains. All of that, of course, was unfunded when we came to office, and it's pretty emblematic, frankly, of the way in which those opposite announced projects, decided to stand up with their press releases, sometimes with fake cheques, about road funding, but couldn't deliver because it was all about the announcement and not about the delivery. Now, we have changed that. That is what we are focused on, in delivering projects that, in fact, have properly funded, properly planned, and that's important. That's what we saw from those opposite. I've undertaken that is we are not interested in that approach because it means you simply cannot deliver those projects. Now, I know we remain very committed to the member for Calare, your area. We're investing a lot there already. We've invested planning money for Dixon's Long Point Crossing, money for the Cox River Road upgrade, Peak Hill Road upgrade, over $22 million for oversized mass improvements on the Golden Highway, $10 million for those critical renewable energy zone roads. There's projects in community infrastructure that you've advocated strongly for, $15 million for the Orange Sporting Precinct, for example. We're investing in infrastructure in Calare, but we do it properly. We do it in a way that we know that we can deliver, that are properly planned and properly costed, unlike those opposite, who frankly raised expectations and then failed to deliver anything.
Call to the honourable member for Lingiari.
To the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government supporting First Nation Australians living in remote parts of the country by securing good jobs, easing the cost of living and delivering essential infrastructure?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Lingiari for her question, and it was indeed an absolute pleasure to be with the member there at Uluru just over a week ago to celebrate the 40 years since the handover of Uluru Katajuda to First Nations people, to the traditional owners. And it was a wonderful celebration, and it was indeed a great honour for me as Prime Minister to be there. Now, Labor promised to abolish the failed CDP, which was essentially work for the dole, that provided no training, no skills, no real wages, no real advancement for First Nations people in remote communities, and to replace it with real jobs with proper wages and decent conditions. And we've done just that as of Saturday, the 1st of November. The CDP is gone for good, and it's gone nationwide. We replaced it with the Remote Australia Employment Service, building on the 1,700 remote jobs we're already rolling out, over halfway to the 3,000 that we will deliver. This is all about our government's focus on economic empowerment for Indigenous Australians, tangible, positive change, creating new opportunities. We also have a responsibility to ensure that every community has access to the fundamentals of a decent life, things that most Australians take for granted. And last year, our government made a generational investment in remote housing in the Northern Territory. Our 10-year agreement will deliver up to 2,700 homes in the Northern Territory, many of them up and running already, and I met people in that community who have already benefited from this program, tackling overcrowding and creating local jobs. We have 33 remote water projects are on track to bring clean and reliable water to 25,000 people. And in response to the Closing the Gap report, we promised new action to cut the cost of 30 household staples for families in remote communities. As of Saturday, more than 100 community stores have signed up to that. That's about getting essentials like flour and tinned fruit and toothpaste, those essentials that most of us take for granted in Australia, getting it so that people can stay healthy on country. Our government is focused on making a real difference for First Nations people in remote communities, economic empowerment, healthy lives supported by good jobs and wages. And the member for Lingari is such an outstanding advocate for people in those communities, and I congratulate her on the extraordinary work that she is doing, which is why she was so well received by the local population, the Ananu people there in Uluru.
Give a call to the honourable member for Monash.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. House prices in the month of September grew at a faster pace than at any other time in the last 2 years. Now industry is warning that the government's reckless expansion of its Help to Buy scheme will push house prices up by 6.6% in 2026 and for several years after that. Hopes for a Christmas rate cut are now dashed. Is this what the Prime Minister meant when he said he has real and lasting plans for cheaper mortgages?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Monash for her question, and indeed I hope that she writes to the 1,358 members of her electorate who benefited from the 5% home deposits. I hope she writes to them.
Order.
I hope she writes to them and say that somehow it's inappropriate that you're buying your own home. What you should have done was just stay paying off someone else's mortgage rather than pay off your own mortgage, because that is what the member for Monash is suggesting. But she raises housing policy under this government that I'm proud to lead, with a housing minister who's doing an extraordinary job supporting increases in social housing, increased build-to-rent schemes for private rentals, as well as increased home ownership across the board. In August, indeed, the Leader of the Opposition was claiming that this policy was, I'll quote directly, "Today Labor announced a revised Morrison government policy which we developed to help Australians get into their first home with a smaller deposit." So it was their policy that they tried to claim, then they're against it. Now they're against the 1,358 Australians who have benefited in just that one electorate from this. But we know that there is a comparison, of course, because we heard it yesterday from the member for Wright. The member for Wright said, and he backed up today, saying exactly when the housing minister was making her contribution in this chamber, said that the reason why there was no housing minister under the former coalition government was that it wasn't needed. Apparently, up to 2022, everything was hunky-dory.
Order. The Prime Minister will pause. The manager on a point of order.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. On relevance, of course, there is a question here. The Prime Minister is not attempting to answer the question. He's paying a lot of attention to the member for Wright, which I'd recommend, of course, but that wasn't in the question. And this is a serious question about an increase in his own government scheme leading to increased house prices, and the Prime Minister has not addressed it and is not addressing the question.
The Manager has raised his point of order. The Prime Minister was asked about the house prices growing at a faster pace over the last 2 years, and he's indicated that he's covering that as a topic. He was asked about rent to buy, he was asked about, or help to buy, sorry, and interest rate cuts. And the question was about is this what he meant by the cheaper mortgages? So there was a lot in that question, and he's reflected on, he's commented on some commentary about the topic, but I asked him to remain directly relevant in light of what the manager has raised.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Those opposite believe, as I was saying, that everything was hunky-dory before May 2022. There were houses being built everywhere, there were social homes and people were getting into public housing. Rentals apparently were coming down under them. It's all nonsense, because it's all about supply. And what we have done is concentrate on supply.
Order.
Increased building and increased supply, which is why the increased approvals—
Order. Members on my left.
—which the figures came out yesterday showed that under this government you are getting an increase in supply. And as we go around the country, right around the country, at all the projects that are opening under the programs that we have established, over 520,000 new homes have been built under Labor. We're just getting started, more to do, but we will deliver.
Call to the honourable member for Werriwa.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese government standing up for workers, including those who have to work on public holidays? What other approaches have been put forward?
Call to the Minister for Employment and the Minister for Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Werriwa for that question. It has been 9 weeks and 4 days since our legislation to protect penalty rates came into effect. And this government took this action because if you work on weekends and public holidays, you deserve penalty and overtime rates. And if you are one of the almost 6,000 award-reliant workers working in Victoria today, our legislation has protected your penalty rates because the Albanese Labor government backs low-paid workers. Now, Speaker, I'm asked how this compares to other approaches. Well, when our legislation was before the parliament, the coalition used every excuse to stand in the way of action to protect penalty rates. The Shadow Minister for Employment did not miss an opportunity to criticise our protections of penalty rates. He claimed it does nothing for workers. Of course, this is not a new position for the Shadow Minister. In 2017, he voted against protecting Sunday penalty rates in the parliament. But it does seem, Mr Speaker, that in the past few days the Shadow Minister has had a change of heart. I noticed over the weekend that the Shadow Minister has a newfound love of public holidays. In fact, the Shadow Minister has declared on social media that a Wilson government there will be a new public holiday on Melbourne Cup Day. Primarily, it seems to get him out of coming to Parliament. Now, I'm not sure if this is official Liberal Party policy, but it has been enthusiastically backed by Senator Hume, I note. But I hope a policy of this nature, of course, will include protections for all workers, not just politicians like he seems to advocate for. Now, a word of caution, though, for workers right across Australia.
that workers probably shouldn't put this public holiday in their diary just yet. Because according to a recent poll, even the independent member for Wentworth is a preferred Liberal leader than the member for Goldstein. But you never know, Mr Speaker, he might just be a little slow to get out of the gate. And we may see a Wilson government sometime in the future. But of course, in all seriousness, Mr Speaker, it is incredibly disappointing that we see the coalition completely talking about themselves, which days they're going to have off. Of course, is it going to be the member for Farrer, the member for Canning, the member for Kew, or even the member for Goldstein that will lead this party? It's only our Labor government that will back Aussie workers.
Order. Give the call to the member for Calare.
To the Housing Minister.
Order. Members on my right. There is an order for question, which as everyone knows, but I don't know why. Order. 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 When the House comes to order, we do not need this behaviour. The member for Calare, it is a crossbench order. 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 When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Calare.
To the Housing Minister. In the midst of a national housing crisis, the central west of New South Wales and country communities around Australia are missing out on key national housing funding. Community housing providers like Housing Plus can't get a look in with the Housing Australia Future Fund. The stats show that regional New South Wales is not getting its fair share. The Housing Australia Future Fund is in danger of being known as the Housing Australia Future Fund for city people. When will country people get a fair go from this fund?
Give the call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness, the Minister for Cities.
Thank you so much, and can I thank the member for Calare for his question and the really powerful advocacy he provides for people in his part of the world. Speaker, he's absolutely right. I'm on my feet often talking about the shape of this national housing crisis that's been cooking in our country for 40 years. It has a very, very important regional dimension, and I thank those particularly on the crossbench, and I'd include Dr Haynes in this, people who are consistently coming to me and speaking the voice of regional Australians and the need for us to continue to work with those of you in the bush who are struggling with housing. The home ownership statistics in your part of the world are looking pretty good. I think there's about 1,300 people in the member for Calare's electorate who've got into first home ownership with our government's backing, but home building is going to continue to be an issue. We have a Housing Australia Future Fund is the centrepiece of our government's commitment to building 55,000 social and affordable homes around the country. 5,000 of those homes have already been constructed, and most of those have tenants in them. We've got about 25,000 that are in planning or construction. The remainder of the Housing Australia Future Funds have not yet been committed. What I would say to the honourable member, Housing Australia has a requirement to deliver housing around the country, but I'd offer him the opportunity, if he'd like, for me to meet with his community housing providers to talk about the remainder of the HAF money. There's two really important funds that are being expended at the moment. One is the remainder of the Housing Australia Future Fund. The other is the $1 billion, part of the $1.2 billion commitment that our government's made to building crisis and transitional accommodation around the country. I might add, Speaker, that's 20 times what the Coalition spent in 9 years, and we're expending that in our first 5 years in government. This is another thing that the member for Calare might be interested in. So really pleased to come and talk to you and your community about that, I'd say to the honourable member. And I will just say to the parliament, you know, all of us represent local electorates where there's housing need that's particularly acute. We've all got people in our communities that need and deserve extra support from our government on housing. After a 9-year period where the Coalition built 373 social and affordable homes, we're building 55,000 over 5 years. Whatever you might like to say about housing, Speaker, this is a really meaningful contribution to a national problem. You know, I meet the tenants who live in these homes. I hear how their lives have been radically changed overnight because for the first time in their life, many of them have got access to secure housing. I'm thinking of a woman who I met in Adelaide recently who was looking at becoming homeless late in her life. She's in a Housing Australia Future Fund home. It's changed her life and the life of her family, and we're going to do it 55,000 more times. Thanks, Speaker.
Call to the member for McNamara.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to help Australians with a student debt and to make our education system better and fairer?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank again my friend the member for McNamara for his question. Well, the race that stops the nation has been run and won, and there are a few lucky winners across the country. But in the next few weeks there won't just be a few winners, there'll be millions of them. And that's because we're cutting student debt by 20%. Mr Speaker, we're now in the home straight. A year ago the Prime Minister announced it. 6 months ago Australia backed it. 3 months ago we passed it. And in just a couple of weeks' time Australians will get it. Millions of Australians will get their student debt cut by 20%. Millions will get their debt cut by thousands of dollars, on average about $5,500. And young people don't always see something for them on the ballot paper when there's an election, but they did this year, and they voted for it in their millions. And now they're about to get it, and to see it, and to feel it, and to hear it, because they'll get a ding on their phone, an email or a text message to tell them that their debt has been cut by 20%. And when that happens, there'll be one person that they can thank for it, and that's this Prime Minister. Mr Speaker, I'm asked by the member for McNamara, what else are we doing to build a better and a fairer education system? Well, I can advise the House that paid prac has now started. That's financial help for teaching students and nursing students, midwifery students and social work students while they do their practical training. That's real cost of living help. And so far, more than 65,000 Australians have applied to get it. I can also advise the House that next year 2 new end-to-end medical schools will open up to train more doctors, one in the north in Darwin, one in the south in Launceston. And next week I'll open 2 more university study hubs, one on the west coast in Northam and one on the east coast in Beenleigh. And this Friday I'll be in Smart Street, in the heart of Fairfield, in the heart of Western Sydney, with the member for McMahon, opening the University Study Hub that the member for Fowler asked me about just last week, bringing university closer to where people live. Mr Speaker, this is what delivery looks like, and this is what we are focused on: cutting student debt by 20%, paid prac for teaching and nursing students, and more university study hubs in the bush and in the suburbs, and there's more to come.
Prime Minister has the floor. Member Goldstein, resume your seat. Prime Minister has the floor.
Christian Brothers taught me mercy, Mr Speaker, and I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper in all of our interests.